All right, everyone, welcome to day 28 of the 30-day redemption. We're going to take another journey today on the spiritual path. Remember, we've done 10 days of mind, 10 days of body, and we're doing 10 days of spirit. This is the 8th day or the 28th day of our journey. I'm Chaashab, and today we're going to do a topic on the spiritual subject called self-redemption. If anyone has checked out the two shows that I personally did, these shows tie in, or these presentations tie in to the rebirth topic and the cult redemption topic. But this one is self-redemption. That's going to help you to go more into yourself and not necessarily the outside, but what's going on the inside of you. So give us an hour of your time, sit back, take any notes you like, and after we're going to have a Q&A. So what is this self-redemption topic all about? Let's take this journey. What happens during self-redemption, or what is preventing you from self-redemption? There's a combination of things. You may have guilt. You may have shame. You may have stress about self-redemption. What is that? The guilt and the shame is telling other people no, or being embarrassed, or not seeming like, or not fitting in. Then there's the outcast scenario where no one wants to be shunned, no one wants to be left out. If you have any failures with your obligations for whatever circumstance, whatever reasons. For example, there's people right now who are dealing with unemployment. 26 million or more Americans have filed for unemployment. Why so many people file for unemployment? Because the system is shut down. They may give you some kind of feeling of failure because maybe you didn't prepare. Maybe you didn't prepare for any kind of disaster. What about judgment and ridicule or other responsibilities that make you feel a sense of unredeemed, a sense of guilt? When we had our discussion the other day about rebirth, we talked about the two different selves. You have the artificial self, which is the person, the character, the actor you have become over your lifespan. And then you have the true self, which was your originally created intent or your purpose. And those two entities live within you and create a conflict of interest. And so, again, just really quickly, the artificial self is a product of your parents' mate selection. Your parents getting together created you, and whatever that foundation was, be it good or bad, whether it's a silver spoon in your mouth or dirt, you were created in that particular, by that particular circumstance. Then you have the DNA that is transferred from them. And then you have the covenant that is made with the rest of the world when you have your birth certificate and when you're born into society and when you're put amongst other family. You just have circumstances that create your artificial self. You have environmental concerns or environmental stimulants. You have social, political, cultural, and educational stimulants. Okay. And some of us get very comfortable in this type of distorted reality that we call reality. And it creates this person, this character. Okay. Then you have the true self, which is the divinely created you. You were given purpose. You was given energy. You were given a spirit. You were given instructions. There is information in your DNA that goes all the way back for many ancestors who may have been on a particular mission, good or bad, that you have to continue because it's in your bloodline. You have your callings, you have your dreams, you have your passions. And you have this mental compass that's pushing you in a direction. And some of us fight it and resist it. Sometimes other people help you to fight and resist it. You have opportunities that help to bring you closer to your destiny, that you have this fork in the road. You have breakthroughs that help you to see through certain things. Maybe a family story, maybe meeting a family member that can tell you something about yourself or something about your family that makes things click. And once you discover this true self, it empowers you, it gives you courage to follow your purpose and your destiny. But these social standards on the artificial side, they perpetuate guilt and obligations so that the true self can't live, and the artificial self is subject to things like keeping up with the Joneses. Hey, he has I'm driving a 2000 Honda Accord, but he's driving a 2020 Mercedes Benz. Man, I feel inadequate. The neighbor across the street is building a new house on that empty lot. I'm feeling inadequate. These things make you a prisoner in your own mind and in your own body. There's also roles for women according to Western culture. A housewife may or may not be, back then a housewife was a good thing. A housewife may not be a good thing today because there are social, political movements that are saying that who wants to just be a housewife? Okay. Back then, a housewife was a great asset to the family because the children didn't have to go and be in aftercare and all these other scenarios for how many hours a day your child is away from you. Then there's Western roles for a husband, a really good man. I love a man in a suit and tie. I've got tall, dark, and handsome, and all these other obligations. So the tall, dark, and handsome, what about the short, light skin and ugly? What are his options if she wants a tall, dark, and handsome? The changes in roles today, where you can't even be politically incorrect and call a child a boy or call a girl a girl. Now you have to be gender neutral. These external social standards create so much confusion, and it gives people guilt. It may give the person who is calling the young boy a boy guilt because you're not sure. Don't call me a boy. I'm not a boy. Okay. How would you like to be addressed, people say? Or within the black community, someone saying, I don't know, are you African American? Are you black? Like, how would you like to be? What title would you like to be recognized by? Black community over the last 50 years, the name changes. Negro, colored, black, African American. Now it's gender neutral, race neutral. And these things create standards that are so impossible to keep up with. And it causes people to be polarized, not knowing what is acceptable, because you want to stay within the artificial self, because the artificial self fits in. The true self doesn't fit in. The true self is going to call things exactly what it is, and it is what it is. This artificial self has to be politically correct, especially if you're at work. Especially if you're a school teacher. So you can't even be natural. Also wanting to be like, and the fear of rejection. Our children in school go through this. The bullying is a product of social standards. I mean, even when I was in elementary school, or even when I was in junior high school, the children that make fun of other children and act rich because their parents bought them a pair of sneakers with the whole check, but send your child to school looking like if you're rich. Get off the bus, you're going to live in the projects, but you have the latest sneakers. This type of illusionary lifestyle. Wanting to be liked, wanting to fit in, or just not wanting to be ridiculed, wanting to be left alone. You create this prison for the self that needs to be redeemed out of this personality that you have become. Then you also have your social media personality, and you could go online. You could be anyone you want to be. You can have any name you want to be. You can put out whatever. You can disguise. You can be whatever you want to be. And that's acceptable. This is a socially acceptable platform for you to be whatever you want to be. Sometimes you even get to see who people truly are by their expressions. There's a scripture in Matthew 13:28 where the Lord was talking to, or the Lord was giving a parable to the disciples, and he was talking about how seeds was cast into a field. And when it was time for what was planted to come up, something else came up. They was like, say you planted apples, and there's like, not apples, let's use okra. You planted okra, but then something else, some other weed, some other plant came up that was trying to kill the okra. And so they said to him, well, you planted okra, so where's this other stuff coming from? And he said, an enemy has done this. Somebody else planted something else. And this is what happens within you. You were planted as a true self in the womb of your mom with a true planted intention. And along the way came all these other weeds, all these other personalities, all these other standards that made it choke you from being you. Who done this? An enemy has done this. An enemy has done this to you and to try to defy or to prevent. For example, many of you who are living a purposeful life probably had problems even before you were even conceived, because they might have been problems within your dad, problems within your mom, problems at conception, problems between them at conception, problems at birth, separation, fighting, disconnection, reconnection. All these things coming into your life, all these forces coming in to prevent you from becoming the original intended seed that was planted. So you were supposed to be an apple tree, and along the way, it didn't happen. You were supposed to be a teacher or a changer of the world through your writings. Not done, because you got to pay these bills and writing isn't doing it. You have to be someone who teaches children and make an impact on them. Can't do it. Got to take this other job, or life got misdirected. An enemy has done this. There's also cultural standards that perpetuates guilt and obligation. Just because it's cultural don't make it right. Just because it's social doesn't make it right. What makes it right is if it's right, and if it gets you to the highest true potential of what you were created for. That's the only option. Everything else that's mediocre, getting by, just getting money, where you feel unfulfilled, you know that true self is the way to go when someone who has everything, the family, the money, the lifestyle, and they kill themselves. And you wonder, what could possibly be wrong? You're famous, you have money, your family loves you, you're funny. What happened? Really wanted to do something different, and now have to stay in this character because this is what pays the bills. So there's cultural standards that are put on people that are not necessarily true. For example, everyone that has your skin is not your kin. You identify with someone by skin color, and they hold a totally different philosophical belief than you. We have that between the who they call in the system the boule, which are, amongst the black community, there are blacks who feel that they are the upper 10th, and so therefore they are supposed to lead the charge for all the other uneducated and not upper 10th blacks. They've charged themselves with that responsibility to be the overseers of the rest of the black community. If you check your history, you will see that Marcus Garvey and W. Du Bois had beef. They had problems between one another because how dare Marcus Garvey, who was not amongst the upper 10th, have such an impact on so many people? When the upper 10th under W. Du Bois, you know, he had an organization called the Niagara Movement, and he was pulled in by another organization called the NAACP to make him part of an organization ran by non-black people, which had 75 years of non-black people running it. He was pulled in, so of course, as the upper 10th, the more educated, he's supposed to be the leading person. How dare, and he called Marcus Garvey a buffoon. How dare this buffoon, who has an impact on 1 million people, be in the position he's in? So everyone that has your skin is not your kin. These are two black people fighting for the cause of black people and couldn't agree to this day. That same energy existed between Malcolm and Martin. Yeah, we see the famous handshake, but they didn't agree philosophically. Martin be on the upper 10th, upper echelon, black and educated, and Malcolm coming out of prison going hard for the Muslim movement and for the cause of black people. How dare he? And guess what? Here's the irony, okay? Malcolm X's father was a Garveyite, followed Garvey. So it's almost like that spirit continued. But again, everyone that has your skin is not your kin. And so you hold yourself to the standard of a community that some of the members of the community do not hold your same skin color philosophy. Same thing happens in the white community. All white people do not agree with racism. Not all. Now, some may take the benefits, but not all agree with the philosophical views of racism and supremacy. Some go harder for black people than black people. Okay, look at the gentleman that was part of the Underground Railroad out there in West Virginia. Forgot his name. I don't want to say the wrong name, but he not only was part of the Underground Railroad, but died for treason. And not only did he die for treason, if anyone knows his name, just chime in and say his name. I think his last name was Brown, but I don't want to say the wrong name. But he died for the black cause. And he fought. He went up to Illinois with his militiamen to fight for the cause of black people. So again, everyone that has your skin is not your kin. There's people that will fight for you more than those who carry your own skin color and your DNA. So cultural standards make you think that you are obligated to skin color, and the spirit within the people with the skin color differs like light and day. Like day and night, I should say. Okay. The second thing is family values that obligate you to some kind of stagnant lifestyle. Like poverty is supposed to be perpetual because you came from nothing, and so you fall into nothingness. Those cultural standards hold you obligated to a lifestyle, and they pull you in. I had a scenario where a young man that I was mentoring was told by his kin, by his flesh and blood, to get these drugs and sell the drugs. And I was trying to get him to move far away from that lifestyle. Family values that pull you into a stagnant, backwards lifestyle. Also the cultural roles of women and the reinforcement of some outdated customs. You have to consider that the world is changing. I'm not saying that there's not the need for certain gender roles, but in some scenarios, if your woman is more educated in a particular field than you, just because she's a woman doesn't mean that you should not promote her in that field. If she's an entrepreneur, you're not, and her entrepreneurialism can benefit your family, why would you stagnate that and have her in a role that does not allow her to maximize on her abilities for your family? So some of these cultural standards suffocate growth. Also, some of the roles of men and the reinforcement of those roles, and some of the macho roles, and some of the because you're a man you know, or because you're a woman you don't know. These things stagnate and obligate people to behave in ways that are contrary. Now, let me side note this and say this does not give a pass for people to be arrogant, neither the male nor the female. It doesn't give people the 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 right to deny certain natural roles. For example, um, women are supposed to have a child. If they're married, you're made, I should say, to have a child. This movement of not wanting to have any children is genocide. It's a philosophical outside thought, even the one that you have to wait until after your career for you to have a child. Some of these values are twisted because they take away nature out of the equation. So there are certain natural roles. Women are supposed to have children, men are supposed, but what are they doing? They're making people who are not male and female by marriage adopt. And who are they pulling from? They're pulling from the pool of the have-nots and the marginalized, the black community, the Hispanic community. Everybody else is adopting. That's genocide as well. So we have distortion of culture, even, that's still being called culture. So you may have something that started a particular way in a particular country, and then it gets distorted along the way, and they're still calling the distortion of culture culture. And we're going to look at a video of that distortion of culture. Also, you have distorted culture now mixed with a little bit of social media, so people are showing their distorted culture. For example, in America, a lot of people talk about going back to Africa, and in Africa, there's also distorted culture that's not according to the original thing. So you mix media and the influence. You have people in Africa emulating the Real Housewives of Atlanta. You have the technology coming in and infiltrating these cultural distortions with further distortion. Then you have foreign influence coming into the country and distorting ownership. For example, in Africa, there are a lot of foreigners going in, white foreigners, Chinese foreigners, going into Africa, marrying African women, having children with them with a long-term goal of obtaining their land and their rights. That's not culture, but it's economics. It's also warfare. That's economic warfare, because they already know that that child is going to follow the pattern and the loyalty of its dad. So that land is lost. That inheritance is lost because that child has a right. So let's take a look at one of the cultural distorted philosophies. For anyone that's easily offended, this may not be the video for you, but it's something to show how a cultural standard holds the self ransom, and that self needs to be redeemed. So let's take a look at this video really quick.
Ndinapanga programu ya kulowa kufa 1985. Ndinalowera akazi okwanira 104. Ayisamawo payayi kutera ku amakhala omaso kwambiri kuti no ndikamapanga zimene zija imakhala ngati ndithu banja imene ndithu kuti no kungoti ndapanga zimenezo siku ndapanga zimenezo kucha kwa lero ndikuti madzi abwino otentha abwino kundikira kubafa kenaka ndithu kumandibwirabwira kuti usiku uja nditacheza bwino kwambiri kusangalala kwambiri. Ya ndizoona kuti no zikuzasukhala mbali imene yofalitsa matenda HIV/AIDS malinga ndi mwambo wathu akufuka timalowa kufa fuleni sitimatenga chitetezo kapena chishango kuvala kumapanga zimenezo.
Clearly that practice has to go. Okay? Clearly that practice is outdated. Okay, let me just adjust my screen really quick. Hold on. Make sure we're on the same page here. Oops. Bear with me. 1 second, everyone. Pause share for a second. I'm going to come back to that. Hold on 1 second. All right, we're back. So obviously, some cultural standards that's holding you ransom, you have to be redeemed from. And so how do you redeem yourself from it? Well, education. This is one step. These conversations that we're having is a form of redemption. But we could judge his cultural practice, but you have your own cultural practices as well. So there's a conflict of interest that is formed by a combination of your social standards, cultural, and the artificial created self. You have all of this going on. This is our culture. Well, have you examined your culture? Is it appropriate? In light of everything you know and the knowledge that you have? These social standards, is this correct? Is this the way it's supposed to go? Even right now, as people are in lockdown, who's supposed to have and give the authority to government that you've elected to tell you what to do? Okay, it's for the benefit of everyone else, but how far does it go? They just passed a law last year in New York that says your religious right doesn't matter when it comes to inoculation. You can't use that as an exemption anymore. Who said they have the right to do that? Well, you elected them, put them in position, and they agreed. So some of these social standards, cultural standards, and the artificial created self, it entraps you. So your true self now feels a sense of guilt. Well, I can't do that, you know, or obligation. Well, I have to do that. Oh, no, it's my responsibility. It's the man's duty. A real man. Meanwhile, your heart giving out because a real man has 3 jobs to provide while his wife is home watching the Real Housewives of Atlanta, texting her boo. Let's be realistic. Let's be correct. Or the man doing the same thing, the flip side. These responsibilities, external judgments, the ridicule, the shame, build up unnecessary stress. So the redeemed self cannot be redeemed because the artificial self is holding it captive underneath these standards that is in your head. And some of it is not in your head, but a lot of it is. So trying to fit your true self into the artificial self's world. That's what you look like in the mirror. You're seeing a character. You're seeing an actor. And these things have an effect on your health. We'll touch on that later. Are you trapped within your artificial self? Things like Stockholm Syndrome, where the person who has been held captive is sympathetic to the person holding them captive. There's been scenarios in the past where you got a guy and a girl is having a fight, and the Good Samaritan steps in. Hey, what are you doing with her? You step in and he begins to pull the guy off and start to beat up on the guy, and then the girl jumps on the back of the Good Samaritan and don't you hit him? Some people die being the Good Samaritan because the Stockholm Syndrome is that the person who is held captive or the victim sympathizes with the person who is injuring them. And I wanted to bring in my good friend Jabrita And if she could chime in a little bit on this, as far as that mentality fitting into the space of trauma, if she's available, and talk about just, blurb on that personality of guilt or obligation to the person or to the scenario that is actually counterproductive for you. So, Jabrita, are you around? If so, maybe you could unmute and jump in. I hope.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, perfect. All right. What do you think
I'm
about
actually, I'm just gonna pick back up on where you stopped off with the Stockholm syndrome. And you went into it in a little bit of detail, but I do want to go into it with a little bit more in depth. So Stockholm syndrome, as Chaashab stated, is feelings of a connection to your captor. Okay, so feelings of trust or affection felt in many cases of kidnapping or hostage taking by the victim toward the captor or the abuser in most cases. And just to give you a little bit of history on Stockholm syndrome and where it derived from, it actually derived from a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden back in 1973, where the employees were held hostage for over 6 days. However, during the standoff, this dysfunctional bond was created or built or developed between the captives and the captor. The very weird thing about that is that why is this important? Why is the history of Stockholm syndrome important? Why is it important to know about what Stockholm syndrome is? And I'm going to give some personal background, and I'm also going to give some professional background. So I'll start with the professional side. Usually, most people think that Stockholm syndrome is a mental disorder or some form of, mental breakdown. It's not technically a disorder. It's really a syndrome. It's a syndrome. And the best treatment that is advised to use against Stockholm syndrome is therapy and or treatment from all forms of abuse, which is, usually through a psychiatrist. The treatment varies depending on the depth of abuse and the extended time spent in that situation. Why is it important to know about Stockholm syndrome? I'm going to give you a personal story now. So many people who have heard my story or even a story that I've told before in the past know that I come from a very abusive background. Okay, I grew up in a household where there was not just physical abuse, but there was also verbal and emotional abuse. My brother and I were indirectly affected by the abuse between our parents. And as a result of that, we know that anytime you begin to, anytime that you take part in inadvertently, whether it be voluntarily or involuntarily, you begin to repeat the cycle of the environment in which you were conditioned. So I'm really trying to take my time to kind of bring it in for you. So I grew up in an abusive background. My father was an alcoholic. He also was addicted to drugs. As a teenager, growing up from teenager to my youth, the last fight that I recall of my parents was when my mother almost kicked my father off the balcony. Bring it current. As we began to have conversations with my mom, I would say, Mom, why did you stay? What was your reason to stay with my father through all of the beatings, through, me having to clean blood off my mother's face, from cleaning blood off the kitchen floor, from all of these many various forms of abuse that I encountered, experienced between my parents. Her reaction and response to me was this. She said, one of the reasons why I stayed is because what I realized now is that I was more dedicated to the commitment of having a family than I was to endure the abuse of what was happening to me. I want to pause there. Stockholm syndrome usually you are more committed to the outcome of what you are desiring from a thing than you would be to what's actually happening in the experience of the thing you're experiencing and experiencing it in. So as a child, I remember, you know, the different variables when it came to my father going from 0 to 1,000, having to see them fight, having to clean up furniture after, having to, you know, give my mom different things like that. As a teenager, from a teenager out, I began to experience some of the same patterns and some of the same behaviors. One, because I was uneducated. Two, because it was environmental. So I thought that it was just something that I was going through, or something that was, how should I say it? Something that was, you know, a part of my destiny because I had experienced it. And three, because of the conditions in which I was around. Environmentally, I was under, you know, poverty. Environmentally, my father, again, alcoholism, drug addiction, you know, those types of conditions. So I felt bound to the conditions in which I experienced as a child. And so it wasn't until, of course, I became educated, I got away from, you know, the dysfunction of my parents and the different environments in which I was in, and I began to seek help for myself. So while it is very personal, it is also, although I am a professional, it's also very personal for me in this regard, because you begin to have, you know, or grow, like they said, develop a relationship between the captive and the captor. So in this regard, my father was, you know, the one keeping my mother hostage, and my mother had a commitment to the captor based on the desired outcome that she wanted for her family. To even go a little bit back further, you had mentioned in one of your slides the family values. 9 times out of 10, most people who come out of poverty inflicted conditions, or come from you know, abuse, domestic violence, or drug addiction, or whatever those, alcohol addiction, people who come out of those type of environments don't always walk away with, or knowing or understanding what family values are. And because you don't understand what those values are, you begin to attribute your life to the environment, right? Involuntarily of the conditions in which you have come from. So it takes courage. It takes courage. It takes great strength for one to be able to recognize it as abnormal. It's not normal. Two, to be able to confront, you know, the person who is keeping you captive, or the conditions in which are keeping you captive, and also to be able to find the help that is suitable to help you escape, or to exit or transition out of those conditions. So I want to talk a little bit about a few things that are conditions as a result of Stockholm Syndrome. For one, you know, we deal a lot with post-traumatic stress, you know, PTSD, you know, different things like that. Post-traumatic stress comes from, you know, being under the authority of, or the suppressing of, person or persons or individuals, and those conditions are not suitable or conducive to your well-being. So that's post-traumatic stress. Also, nightmares. You can have nightmares, you know, waking up in the middle of the night, waking up almost in a panic, you know, or frantic, or fighting while you sleep. And those nightmares are due, again, to post-traumatic stress. Insomnia, the inability to go to sleep or stay asleep, or having to stay woke because you are fearful that once you go to sleep, you will begin to have those nightmares that, again, are attributed from I would say being oppressed from the oppressor. Then you're talking about, we go into flashbacks. Flashbacks is another, thing that happens as a result of oppression, under that Stockholm syndrome. Easily startled. So someone walking in the room and what would be a normal reaction seems as if you are, frightened into a panic because something snuck up on you without you knowing, without you being aware. Then confusion goes back and tapping into that artificial self versus, the person that you are really created to be. And I want to stop there for a second, because the confusion between your artificial self, which is the person that you have practiced becoming, versus your real self, which is the person that, now it takes, again, great courage and great strength to be able to identify who you really are, apart from the conditions in which you have been trained to become. So you can be confused based on your environment, based on your experience, based on your reaction and response, and also based on the information that you, one, download, two, process, and three, is able to, see your true self in that identification. And then lastly, you have an enormous inability to trust others. That is huge. Why is that important? Because most people don't understand why they have broken relationships, and where those broken relationships stem from. Well, we all know that it takes, we all know and understand that, we have to, as humans, we have a responsibility to other humans, but we also have a responsibility first to ourselves. And so as a result of that, it's important for you to understand who you are apart from, the abuse that you have encountered, whether it be some of the examples that Chaashab has given today, and or some sorting that you still must do in order for you to get to your true self. So with that being said, Chaashab, I am handing it over back to you.
Okay, excellent. And that was an excellent breakdown, because we get to see there's a lot going on, and then there's a lot of work. There's work that you need to commit to. And then also other people who are involved with you have to also be given the tools. There's that piece as well, because who wants to go through that by themselves? But also other people need the tools, and you can work on that together, or you may have to work on it yourself until you're ready. But definitely not an easy thing, from the more extreme, the Stockholm syndrome, to the more not extreme, to thinking that you're normal under an artificial self. Okay. So I'm going to move on. Thank you, Jabrita. And at the end, if we have some time, we can get anyone that has questions to jump in. But we're going to continue. Okay. So we also have what else holds the self ransom or captive that needs to be redeemed. We have legally binding agreements that we enter into, such as marriages. And the marriage, by the social standards or by the cultural standards, obligates you to behave a certain way. Whatever that agreement is, you have to behave that certain way. And sometimes you don't even know what you signed up for until you're in it. One statement that I have is, you don't know who you're dealing with until you start paying bills together. That's when you really understand what's going on. You live together, start paying some bills, and you start really understanding what this marriage is. Some do well, some don't. Then you have the legally binding agreement with your child. Born in wedlock, born out of wedlock, you have this legally binding relationship, for most people say, for 18 years. I believe it continues beyond that. But this 18-year mark is, you're in this bind for 18 years. If you're in a child support bind, that's an 18-year bind that you have. If you're with a child that's rude, usually about 15, they start, start testing the parenthood, and you're in that bind. You know, you have parents who cannot keep their children in the house and can't keep the children out the house. So they're in the house doing what they want, and you can't kick them out because they're your child and you have a legal obligation. And the society empowers the child more than you. So you have these binds. You have the home bind. You have the mortgage bind. Why are we going over these things? Because all of these things obligate you, give you a sense of guilt. You may not like that spouse. You have a sense of guilt, but they say in some scenarios, it's cheaper to keep her. You have children and you like this here, especially if you have a child that is the splitting image or the splitting personality of the spouse you're no longer with, and you feel like you're now married to the child, and you're like, I don't want to do this. And you feel guilt because that doesn't sound, parenting, adulting is hard, and you don't want to deal with it, but you have to deal with it. The homes, the mortgage, you know, you get a 30-year mortgage, and by 20 years in, it's an empty nest. You got 10 years in a big house by yourself. Didn't calculate that when you signed on the dotted line. You now have this bind. You have to keep the house. You don't know what to do. You sell the house, you have capital gains tax. You don't know what to do. Then you have certain business contracts, such as an apartment lease or a car note or any kind of obligation that you have that you feel obligated to keep, and that holds you in a place of guilt. So let's talk about guilt. What is guilt? You see how that little U is trying to fit into the G, the I, the L to the T? This is a future book. And what does the guilt stand for? I got it like that. What does that mean? That means that you are pretending like you got it like that. You're pretending that it's all good. So you're squeezing yourself into this formula that is a lie. I got it like that. It's all good. It's all good. I got it. Yeah. You don't have it. And that doesn't mean just economically. It might mean mentally. You don't have it. It may mean spiritually. You don't have it. You're falling apart on the inside. You don't know what you're doing. And that's a lot of us. We save face. You are squeezing into the got it like that equation. Let's take a look at it. Here's an example. We have you remember Little Bow Wow? Well, you know, he's no longer Little Bow Wow. Now he's called himself Bow Wow. And back in maybe two or 3 years ago, or maybe longer, but Bow Wow Instagrammed a picture of a plane sitting on the tarmac. He said he was on his way from DeKalb Petrie Airport in Georgia to New York, except that it wasn't Bow Wow's plane. Instead, it appears he took the photo of a private plane on a tarmac from the website for a limo and van service in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So he's now trying to keep the I got it like that. Yeah, you know, Little Bow Wow, you remember, you know, I had these cars, this house, and yeah, you know, I still got it. And so you have to now perpetuate the lie. And it's not just Bow Wow. Let's take a look at it. There's a cost. There's a cost to perpetuate the guilt. It's the guilt fee. If you make $100,000, you're in a six-figure range. For most of us, you're like, wow, you're doing really good. How much school did you go to be able to do that? Oh, wow. You went to how many years of school and how many years of working in this field? Wow, you're making six figures. After that, and they take their taxes out, you're not making six figures. They take the taxes out on the first day you get a check. So you have the taxes that come out, which brings you after, you know, the gross pay, you're roughly around 70,000, maybe even less. But let's look at the numbers. You have the mortgage, because you got to look like you're making six figures. Because who wants to live as a minimalist when you're making six figures? You have to, what they say, you got it, you full on it. You have the mortgage, 3,000. You have the utilities. You know, you got to heat a $3,000 place, which may be, you know, 3,000, 2,500, 3,000, 4,000 square feet. If you're in Georgia, if you're in New York, it's probably 1,500 for the same amount. And that's an apartment, but that's besides the point. Food, car note, insurance, clothing, maybe private school, life insurance, recreation. If you can, you want to go to the gym, you want to do something. you already above at a 6-figure. You're already above your income, roughly. Now you may cut a little bit. You may like, nah, we're not gonna do 500 a month in clothes. We're gonna buy clothes maybe every quarter. You could cut some. You can maybe cut the car note. Food, sometimes you can't cut it. Utilities, it depends. In Florida, you're gonna have to keep that heat on. I mean that AC on. Might be able to get a better mortgage situation, but the numbers show that most times, if you're making that kind of money, you want to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And somehow they did these numbers to make it so that it just doesn't work for you. Unless you're a minimalist, unless you're a miser, unless you're frugal. And then people talk about you. You're making all that money. You don't want to spend that money. And we didn't even add in vacation. We didn't add in gifts. We didn't add in that you're trying to invest to flip the money. We didn't add in the credit cards. You add that in, you're way above. So there's a fee to perpetuate the lifestyle of the artificial person. You now have to evangelize. You become a mascot for the global stakeholders and the bond buyers to evangelize guilt. Instead of evangelizing what you was created for and your true self and be like, I'm going to do what I was created to do, you now are doing what they created you to do, and they're making money by pooling together all the mortgage of all the people who bought into that philosophy. You're not redeemed. You're still underneath this captivity of self, artificial self holding true self captive. So you're now this mascot, this actor. And the global stakeholders, the people who own the light companies, the people who own the mortgage-backed securities, the people who have the pooling and service agreements being worked for all of the mortgages in New York and all of the mortgages in Atlanta, pool them together, and bond holders now are buying into those things there. You're killing yourself to pay the bond owners. You're no longer paying the bank. The bank was out of the equation by the time you signed the mortgage contract. They pool it together, put it on the bond market, and investors buy into that because they know that they have 30 years worth of money, because you are going to be a mascot to perpetuate a lifestyle and evangelize that lifestyle to other unsuspecting people to become an artificial self like you. It's that deep. But not knowing this, you kind of live the life. It's all an illusion. What's really happening is the social standards, the cultural standards, if you are caught up. Now, you can do any of the things that we talked about. Make your money. Make 100,000, make 200,000, make 500,000, but have it all in perspective. Make as much money as you can, live the lifestyle, travel, pay your bills, enjoy your children, but have it in perspective. Because if we go back to all of these things, the mortgage, you don't own the house until it's paid off in 30 years. The utilities, they own the utilities. The food, you eat it and it's gone. The car note, unless you finish paying for the car, you don't own the car. The insurance that you're paying for life insurance, you'll get it. The family will get it if you die. The clothing, you wear it. It comes, it goes, it gets holes. The private school, hopefully you're putting into these children, and hopefully they will take this education and live better than you. But remember, they're also being groomed to be artificial self, to perpetuate and be a mascot as well. So where does the reality kick in? Okay, you have the life insurance, you have the car insurance. They're getting money hand over fist. The only thing you may own is a decent, healthy body if you eat right with the money you're making and work out so that you can live and enjoy the fruits of your labor. But really and truly, you don't own anything for all that you're doing until you finish paying it off. You might own the car in 3 years or 4 years, okay? What's really happening is these things are having an effect on your health. The fear of right now even, oh man, I don't know, am I going to be able to go back to work? I don't know. That is affecting your kidney. Rafaela did a presentation on that a few days ago. The worry weakens your stomach, irritable bowel syndrome. The stress is weakening your heart because you're trying to fit the true self into the artificial mascot role. And it is having an effect on you because you're going against nature. You get angry, co-workers, the games that they play in corporate America, the games people play when you're an entrepreneur. Then the grief, the loss. People are dying right now for whatever reason, whether it's coronavirus or just getting caught up in the hospital, or from the fear, or from the poor health, sitting home. Whatever it is, these things are having real effects on real body parts. Now, if anyone has ever researched what body parts are worth, a kidney is worth $400,000. And if they have to put it in, it's worth about $800,000. After all their research and everything they do to put a kidney in this $800,000 thing, $400,000 for the kidney. Your body parts is worth altogether, your whole body is probably worth 1.5 million just being healthy, which is more than you will make when you finish working and paying off in 30 years. If you're making 100,000 and you have 70,000 in 30 years, you will have more from a healthy body than from the job. It's so the equation is wrong, and I'm putting this for you to be able to consider how you have yourself in captivity and it needs redemption by a shifting in how you think. And that's what we're going to look at. Change your mental picture. The picture, like Jabrita broke down for the Stockholm Syndrome, applies to everyone. The captor is the system. The sympathy we have for the captor is that we're sympathizing with the captors, and we have an obligation for the picture that we have in our mind that it's going to be okay in 30 years. I'm going to pay off this home, or I'm providing this place for my children, or I'm working so hard for my, whatever is your motivation, the captor is benefiting from your motivation, just like the example that Jabrita gave with her mom and dad. The picture that mom had made her suffer. The picture you have is making you suffer. So when are you going to redeem yourself from up under this? This is the beginning of that conversation. So let's look at it. You got to put things in perspective. By doing what? Well, maybe you could go the scripture route for those who believe or are in that lane. He gave an example. What would he do? What would Jesus do? Or Yahshua? What would he do? Well, here's an example what he did, putting everything in perspective. This is Mark 3:32-35. It says, the multitude sat about him, and they said unto him, oh, look, behold, thy mother and thy brethren are outside. They're seeking for you. They're calling for you. He said unto them, well, who's my mother and my brother? And he looked around about them, which sat about him, and said, behold, my mother and brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father, the same as my brother and my sister and my mother. Sometimes you obligate yourself to outsiders because of genetics, because of DNA. And they philosophically don't hold the same views as you. Everybody that has your skin ain't not your kin. So you got to be like, what is it that you're dealing with? Oh, I don't know. I can't obligate myself to that. You got to know how to say what? No. Okay? And for anyone, we're going to go over a little bit, so bear with me. Okay? We're already at that 1 hour mark. Time flies. What's the second option? Well, if you don't want to go the spiritual yet not scriptural route, you could go that route. What is that route? What is the spiritual perspective? Acceptance. That's the spiritual perspective. Acceptance. Accepting things. Finding the love in this scenario. Do that. If you're not super scriptural and think that someone else wrote it and all this other stuff, find a route of putting things in perspective. There are self-serving individuals, and then there's those who serve others. The person who serves others is usually has worse health than the person who serves themselves. Self-serving people are usually healthy, fit, everything, because all they can focus on is themselves. Okay? Those who serve others, or the empathetic, or those who love people, You have to find balance, put it in perspective. Okay, well, yeah, I'm going to do certain things, but I'm going to do it for these group of people that I'm in agreement with, because I can't just be here and there for everybody, spreading myself thin. You may go the stoic route, where you're very logical. Everything comes in. What's the logic? No emotions. Tell me what the facts are. You may go that route. Why must you be like that? Because it's a matter of life or death. It's a matter of survival. It's a matter of true self or artificial self. Okay? So those are just quick introductions to some things that you can use to put it in perspective. Learn to say no. Scripture again, it says, but let your communication be yea, yea, or nay, nay, for whatever else is more than these come of evil. What does that mean? If you mean to say no and you say yes, it's like it's pulling on your heartstrings, and okay, yes. And in the back you might say, damn, why did I say yes? Learn to say no. Say no first. Or practice, let me sleep on it. Let me sleep on it. I'll get back to you. One of my future practices is you probably need to speak to my agent or my trustee on that, because I don't handle that. Put it to somebody. You probably need to talk to my agent. I don't handle any of those things. That's not a no. But they're going to tell you no. Know thyself, says Socrates. So who do you answer to? Who are you obligating yourself to? Who are you letting put self in captivity? Your child? The mortgage company? The credit card company? Student loan? Your family member from across town that never check on you but knows how to call you when they want something? And who holds you accountable? Who holds you to the standard that you've set for your true self? Call them accountability partners. Why are you answering the strangers? You can have family that's strangers because they have a strange way of thinking. Why are you answering the strangers? What makes this person able to tell you to stay in your house? Or what makes, ask questions. Who are you answering to? You're a grown-up. You should ask questions. You have a right. Why are you answering to and punishing yourself for the stories you tell yourself or you obligate yourself to, or the guilt? Oh no, I gotta go to work. I gotta do this. You can minimalize. You can cut some of those overheads. You have options. You have to know what they are. In the scriptures, again, it talks about this obligating yourself to family and obligating yourself to others. This particular scripture says, give not thy son and wife, thy brother and friend power over thee while you live, and give not thy soul to another, lest it repent thee and thou entreat for the same again. You giving, you bending, you doing everything. You're giving people power over you, and you want the same in return, can't get it. You give and give and give, and when you even ask, people are irritated. As long as you live and have breath in you, give not yourself over to any. That's the giving yourself and obligating yourself. And I'm not saying in covenants. I'm saying by default, someone shows up and they just want something and they feel entitled to have it because you're cousins or because you're brothers or because, you went to high school together or because you're black or because you're white or because you have the same political views. No, I don't have any obligation to you. For better is it that your children should seek for you than that you should stand to their courtesy. Now you want to be under and dependent upon your children to take care of you because you took care. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Because the children are being groomed to be artificial self and committed to that. They're not being committed, guaranteed to you. It is no guarantee that because you're a good parent, that your child would turn around and give you the same courtesy of care that you gave them. If you don't believe that, just wait till they turn 18. In all your work, keep to thyself the preeminence, leave not a stain in thy honor. Okay. Here's some suggestions. Why don't you make a covenant with yourself and your tribe? Your tribe are people who think like you and hold the same value system. Why don't you find people who are in sync with that and and be in covenant with those people and have a written covenant so you know what you're obligating yourself to. Also sign a covenant with yourself to end your self-defeating behavior. Break the covenant with your artificial self. Enter into a written covenant with yourself. To thyself be true. And write that out. And have someone, an accountability partner, sign off as a witness. Follow the pattern of those who have successfully achieved this. Do your research. Who has done this? Find your tribe and make a covenant with them. Live according to the covenant, the bylaws, and the rules instead of obligations and entitlements or assumptions. If someone does not say yes to something, you are being presumptuous by holding them accountable to something they didn't say that they would be accountable to. You are holding your children accountable to turning 18 and looking out for you, and they didn't agree to it. You are holding your cousin or your friend. You could even be holding a person that you're dating or a person that you're in a relationship with to default behavior that you didn't agree to or that they didn't agree to. So be deliberate in the covenants, because that is another way of freeing yourself from what? Guilt, obligations, and assumptions. Create a new mental picture. So these are the solutions. Create a brand new mental picture, as we talked about in previous discussion. What does that look like? Create a new mental picture for yourself. You could do it on pieces of paper, or you could do it in your mind. Play it out like a movie. When people say, I can see it real clear. Make it plain, write it out, or think about it and play it out in your mind. Create a plan and work on it diligently for 30 days, like 30-day redemption. The new plan, once worked diligently, will become part of your muscle memory and more habit than thought. And now you're disciplining yourself. Your no is coming easier. Hey, would you like to go to? No. You didn't even let me finish. I did. No. To whatever you're asking, because we're not in covenant. Might seem a little extreme, but practice makes perfect. So here's 8 self-redemption tips that we can offer. Number 1, identify and accept your true self and your life's purpose. If you don't, what they say, whoever doesn't believing anything falls for everything, or something like that. Identify and accept your true self and your life's purpose. This is what I'm about. So if anything isn't jiving with that, I'm not interested. Enter into covenant with yourself and your tribe. Follow the terms of your covenant with yourself and your tribe, and hold all others in perspective. I'm not in covenant with you. One time I posted on my Facebook, do you have a contract with me? If you don't have a contract, then what is the obligation? People laugh, but some of these things you have to say to snap people out of this entitlement that they have. 1, to ask you questions that's none of their business, and 2, to entangle you because of your skin color, that you have to obligate yourself to do something with them. It doesn't work like that. Gather the facts before contracting with outsiders and others. Practice saying no if the request doesn't align with your purpose or your tribal goals. Reduce your overhead and try to become a minimalist and seek passive income from multiple streams so you have more time. Put yourself in a mock scenario to help you sharpen your skills in self-redemption and living a true to self life. Put yourself in a situation where you have to say no. We did a no in November. Put yourself in situations where people tell you no to kind of harden you a little bit so that you can learn to take no and learn to say no. Spend more time in meditation and prayer, more time inside. Be busy. Put your phone on mute. Send some people a voicemail. Measure your progress and make adjustments as you go. Those are some of the recommendations. We're going to open up the lines for any questions, any thoughts, any comments. The lines are open. Does anyone have any feedback? Anyone scared to death? I need to hear from you guys. So unmute. We have some comments in here.
It's a lot to process.
Okay, there we go. Lot to process. Yeah. Well, you have the John Brown. John Brown was the guy from West Virginia, the white guy who died fighting for the cause of black people. Thank you for that. So what are you saying? A lot to process.
Oh, I'm just saying it's just you know, each one of those things is a task on itself. I'm impressed with the no in November, and you know, it's just a whole bunch of different areas to look at. It's just I don't think you comment on just one particular thing. It just seems like it's just a lot.
It is. Well, good. And that's it. The goal is to shock the heck out of your artificial self to let it know that it's been exposed. And it can't hide under the personality that this is just me. It's not just you. So thank you for that.
Yes,
I see Latanya White. She said, wow. Okay, we'd like to hear from you. And Jabrita said it's so good. Truth. Thank you for that. So again, if anyone has any comments, the line is open. If not, we're going to wrap up, and this will close out at least any sessions that I have to do. Jabrita, did you want to chime in and say anything?
I did. I agree with the gentleman that said it's a lot to chew on. Excellent presentation, Chaashab.
Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely a lot. There was a lot of takeaways even for myself that I got some things that I would definitely be pondering upon and really thinking and deflecting and reflecting at the same time. So thank you. It's definitely going to take more than, you know, the next hour to process, but a lot of very, very good, you know, nuggets
content.
So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Yeah, and that's what it was designed to do. Let that self become shock. You have to shock sometimes yourself into reality. Okay, Estella, did you have some feedback?
Yeah, that was great. That was, you know, just putting in perspective, like the background I came from, my culture and things like that. That was something that I had to, well, I'm slowly, it is a lot of work. It is a continuous process and a journey. But yeah, I grew up in certain, you know, in a culture where there was certain practices, certain things that I had to break out for myself. So it just shows that like the work doesn't stop. You have to continue to fire the artificial self and you know, put that armor on of true self and continue to keep that up, because you will fall for anything.
Absolutely, because the artificial self wants back in. For any of you who read scriptures, there's a scripture that speaks about how the unclean spirit went out of a man, and it says when the unclean spirit went out of a man, it went around seeking, you know, where it can find rest, and it said, you know what, I'm going to go back to that person.
Yeah,
who is now swept and garnished, meaning that that person is now true self, and that unclean spirit said, I'm going to go back to that person, and I'm going to take 7 other more unclean spirit than the one that left, and enter into that man, and now that man is more confused and more artificial than before. So the battle doesn't stop because you might do a colon cleanse, you might, you know, do 30-day redemption. This is a life battle, because your muscle memory knows the artificial self very well, and it's almost therapeutic to sit inside of that self. But to break from that is going to take work. You know, we're committed to that process, and hopefully, you know, you all go through that full redemption for real, because this is not just a social media ploy. This is for life. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, Estella?
No, that was all.
Okay, thank you for your comment. So I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you all for your time. Tomorrow we're going to go into another presentation. We have another guest coming in that's going to talk about, you know, almost on the dream board side, and I look forward to hearing from her. And then on Thursday we're going to do our last presentation. So hope you all chime in. Darrell, I see, said, yes, great presentation. Need the replay to definitely digest. Thank you both. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Darrell. So have a great day. Keep working on yourself. Check out the replay, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Make the most of it and be true to yourself. Take care.